You are listening to The Art of Sales. Everyone sells every day, and this is your source for conversational, real-world sales and prospecting methods that you are comfortable using and that get results. You'll help people buy instead of pushing them into being sold. Here's your host, Art Subcheck.
Well, hi again and welcome. And also, I want to thank those of you that have reached out to give me your personal comments about the show. And one common comment that I get is that many of you really appreciate the fact that we don't have much fluff here. And fluff would be taking about 3 to 5 minutes to actually get into what we're going to be talking about. I call it fixing to get ready. And that's not my style. I know your time is valuable, and I've probably already taken too much time to talk about that. So let's just get right into the stuff, okay? Something else people talked about or requested was, what do we do when things don't go according to plan? When you call somebody up, when you're prospecting, and you hear a blow off or a brush off right away at the beginning of the call. Okay, you asked for it, we're going to deliver. So let's talk about that here. So if you're prospecting, and even if you do everything that I suggest in smart calling, you do it point by point perfectly according to plan, and you deliver what you feel is a customized, tailored, value-packed opening statement, you're still sometimes going to get people who respond with some variation of, I'm not interested, or we're happy with what we're doing. And you should expect it. Don't be deterred by it. Instead, prepare for it. Resistance after hearing an opening statement from an unknown caller is a natural, conditioned reaction for most people. And it usually works to get salespeople off the phone. Well, except you, of course, because you're going to have some conversational ways to get that person talking, which really is the key to keeping the call alive and creating an opportunity. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I've got a name for these kind of instant reactions that many times salespeople create when they begin a call with their opening statement. So I call these not interested early responses resistant reflex responses, triple R's. They simply are a natural reflex for a lot of people. It's kind of like if something's flying at your head, you're going to duck, right? That's an instinct. Not much thought goes into it. It just happens. Now, if we try to come back with one of these with logic, that's kind of tough because really, what are we arguing against? We haven't heard anything of substance yet other than this response. And we don't want to use some goofy reply that some sales books suggest, something like, well, of course you're not interested. I haven't given you anything to be interested in yet. Come on, give me a break. So what should you do? Well, here's what you should do. Get them talking. And we want to move their mind away from their reflexive response and onto something of substance. So we're going to use a pattern interrupt. Let me explain this to you if you're not familiar with it. A model of communication is called neuro-linguistic programming. It was popularized by many of the self-help gurus over the past 20 years or so, most notably Tony Robbins. And it's a theory and a technique, or within that is a theory and a technique called pattern interrupt. Now, without causing your eyes to glaze over, if they haven't already, let me simplify it for our purposes here. When people do or say something automatically, it's a pattern. Now, if you do or say something that stops that pattern of somebody else and then gets them talking or thinking about something else, that is a pattern interrupt. So, in what city were you born? That was a pattern interrupt. You see, you were listening along and probably expecting something else, and I interrupted you with a question that likely caused you to think about the answer, or maybe wonder if I've gone off the deep end. Either way, using a pattern interrupt when you hear a resistant reflex response causes someone to answer the question, which is what we want. For example, let's say after your opening statement, a prospect said, "Yeah, I'm not interested." You could say, "Okay, I see. So where are you now getting your compressors?" Assuming you sell compressors, right? So here's another one. Prospect says, "We're all set." "Oh, I understand. So when's your next project coming up?" Here's another one. We don't need that." "Oh, okay. Well, how are you handling your written off receivables now?" So you can see we pretty much ignore their response because, they're just throwing it out there. And then we're asking a question. And kids are great at this, right? This is not difficult to execute. You simply need to anticipate the resistant reflex responses that you are likely to hear. Or if you've been in sales for more than a day, you already know which ones you hear. And then what we need to do is just prepare our responses. Now, our tone plays a very vital role in determining the success of this reply. We want to use a soft, almost surprised, maybe even disappointed tone of voice. Now, by no means do we want to sound confrontational here. We want them to open up and lower their guard a little bit. We don't want them to feel threatened, like we're going to argue with them, which is what a lot of people teach with their objection rebuttals. So now you might logically be thinking that, okay, yeah, that's fine, but I'm probably still going to hear something like, "Look, what part of I'm not interested do you not get?" And yeah, you'd be right. It doesn't work every time. Nothing does. However, you might be able to at least salvage some opportunities that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise if you just said, "Okay," and then you hung up the phone. Hey, you might open up some opportunities for possible sales that maybe you can cash in on now or maybe in the future. So your return on this little tiny time investment is huge. And after all, you got nothing to lose, right? So the key here, and if you pick this up when I gave the examples, is before asking the question in each one of those, I used a few words such as, "Oh," or "I see," or "I understand," to diffuse any tension that might be there and soften up the question. And I suggest you do the same thing. A sales trainer named Ari Gulper suggests a great softening statement, and he likes to use, "It's not a problem," then recommends diffusing the tension with something like, "Hey, I'm not trying to replace your current vendor. Would you be open to some different ideas that you might not be using now?" Now, that one addresses a little bit more the actual response itself. And again, my suggestion is it could be totally unrelated to what they just said. It's just a question that gets them talking. So bottom line, encountering early resistance is going to happen. It is a natural part of sales and especially prospecting. Now, when we understand it's not a real objection, and then when we're prepared to respond with something like I had just covered with you, that's going to result in many more sales opportunities for you. All right, you know what time it is.
Your attitude will be iron every way, you'll never feel what they say. It's the art of the sales quote of the day.
That's right. It's time for today's quote of the day, and it comes from Albert Hubbard, who was a writer, a publisher, an artist, and a philosopher, and also apparently a very good multitasker. So Albert said, "A little more persistence, a little more effort, and what seemed hopeless failure may turn to glorious success." And that certainly applies to hearing that early resistance at the beginning of the call. All right. Hey, if you enjoy what you are hearing here in our shows and you're getting value from it, why don't you do a favor for a couple of other colleagues? Send them to our show site, which is theartofsales.com, theartofsales.com, and they can hear this and all of the other episodes. And also, if you haven't already, I've got a free book that I'd like to mail to you. Yeah, that's an actual book called How to Place the Successful Sales and Prospecting Call. All we ask is that you help with the shipping. It's a 180-page book. That's an actual turn-the-pages book. That's right. And here's how you get it. At freesalesbook.com. freesalesbook.com. That is for those of you in the U.S. If you're not in the U.S., we have an international option there as well. Okay, until next time, go out and make it your best sales day ever. I'm Art Sobczak.